Welcome to the Dork Forest. Jackie and her pals will never bore us. Shameless confessions
about our obsession
will make us laugh and smile. So let's explore the Dork Forest and dork out for a while.
Hi, I'm Jackie Cation, and you're listening to the Dork Forest. You've done it. You've chosen wisely. The website's JackieCation.com, DorkForest.com, TheDorkForest.com. JackieCation.com has everything, right? This podcast, links to my other podcast, links to my calendar for when stand-up comedy happens again, links to the merch if you want a Ranger of the Dork Forest t-shirt. If you want any of my stand-up merchandise, there's a bunch of new merch over there. There's the old pins. There's a new challenge coin. There's a bunch of t-shirts. There's CDs. There's my DVD. And there's some video, and there's more of the information that you could deal with. Also, so that's on JackieCation.com. And there's a link on, of course, DorkForest.com to the merch page. The other thing you could do is you go to iTunes and review the show. That's always something that's supposed to help. Hi. You might be listening to the show on Pandora or Spotify or Amazon or Stitcher or some other place. Anyway, you might be just listening to it at dorkforest.com, which will also have the videos. As long as we're in COVID, as long as we're in quarantine, I am doing Zoom. I'm doing this show as also a video show. So you can go to the YouTube page and get a bunch of that. That also has a bunch of my stand-up clips on it as well. Let's do the credits. Hey, Mike Ruekberg wrote and composed that song that you just heard, and he sang it with his wife, Sarah. He will sing at the end of the program his words to the Mexican hat dance. Very glamorous. Patrick Brady fixes the audio, the video. He does everything, and he really kind of keeps me sane. Loving Patrick Brady, especially in these days. And then Vilmos keeps JackieCation.com rocking and rolling, as the kids say. There are several ways to support the show. I've already mentioned reviewing the show on iTunes. You could also just tell people that you love the show. That's always something. You could repost it if it's a particular episode you enjoy. You could join the Ranger page on Facebook if you like. That's just a bunch of people who love the show, and they can riff on each other and talk about the show and dorky things that they love themselves. My Twitter, Instagram, and all things, Snapchat, at Jackie Cation. If you ever want to get in touch with me, it's Jackie at JackieCation.com. That's my email address. And if you want to donate, you can just give me money, quite honestly. You can PayPal me, Jackie at JackieCation.com, or use the button on JackieCation.com or DorkForest.com, and it comes directly to me. I will use it, in this case, enormously wisely on things like shelter and food until I'm on the road again. And then, and I appreciate whatever you could send. If you want to make it monthly, if you do monthly things, you can make the PayPal thing monthly. You can also, if you don't like PayPal, you can pay me by Venmo. My Venmo is just my name, Jackie-Cation, and then a picture of me windswept, I believe. Other than that, yeah. Bandcamp. If you've run out of episodes to watch and would like more, there are live episodes on dorkforest.bandcamp.com. And there's a bunch of episodes. There's 200 episodes before I started pre-recording. The best 17 of the horrible audio that they were are on Bandcamp. So you can listen to those for free. There's a bunch of live ones that are like $2 a piece because they cost me some money to produce. So I charge you a couple of bucks. There's also a storytelling album if you like that. So much info. Let's get into the show. Hey, it's Jackie Cation. I'm in my garage. That's right, my little tiny garage room. Returning guest, you guys. Jeremy, it's Wein, right?
Yes.
I sometimes I go Wein, but because I haven't talked to you in real life in so long, and I haven't seen you in New York in probably 2 years. So good to see you, man. Welcome to the program.
Good to see you too. I'm such a big fan of the podcast, so it's always a thrill. And yeah, I was thinking about the other day how I believe, if I'm correct, I brought Dork Forest to New York for the first time as part of the podcast.
You did. It was the live podcast, New York Podcast Festival, and I did it with Judah Friedlander regarding ping pong, if I remember correctly.
And then we did a second one. The first one was with Wyatt, and then
with Bridget. Bridget Everett was in one of them. I think we might have done it 3 times. Or
yeah.
Because Bridget Everett's dorkdom was Barry Manilow, if I remember correctly.
Right. So yeah, I think Wyatt's an act the first one,
And his
Judah
was whiskey or something.
Yeah, and y'all talked about Janice from the Muppets.
Oh, that's right. Because here's the thing. I can remember people's dorkdoms. I cannot remember their names or their faces. It is quite a Dragon Riders of Pern dilemma. But Jeremy Wein, you, I know, I think your last time it was Theater Dork. And we could update it, but I like what you wrote me.
We actually, this is actually my first time on the podcast.
What? Oh, wait a minute. How did you get it?
Yeah, I've been.
No wonder.
Yeah, I think we started to put the wheels in motion on this a couple of years ago, and then I think something happened.
Oh, so it's a classic. The scheduling is genuinely the hardest part of the Dork Forest. But you're wearing the old school, now discontinued Dork Forest logo in green. I've sold them out. Now I just have Ranger of the Dork Forest t-shirts in my garage. Feel free to buy those, Rangers, so that I can then print. I'm going to print essentially that design on a black t-shirt with green writing. Going to bring that back.
Looking at the magnet, too. I still have.
Sweet Ranger magnet. Those are totally discontinued. You got some old school stuff going on here. I can't believe. Anyway, it's Jeremy Wein. Wein, by the way, and it's at This Is My Show on Twitter, and you have try to get good helper theater stuff play per view. Tell me about that first, just because I.
So the Twitter's at This My Show.
Yep.
No A's. And Play Per View is a live streaming theatrical event initiative that was formed as a direct response to the COVID-19 pandemic. We do live stream theater reading events to support nonprofit theaters and community impacted organizations across the country. In our first 6 months, we've done 23 readings and we've raised over $100,000 for various causes.
Oh my God, that is amazing. And are you doing, are people doing sort of a Zoom gallery, a table read kind of thing?
It's a little bit more produced than that.
That's awesome.
We have about like 10 hours of rehearsal. We've done readings now where there's video, there's sound effects. One of them they're all live, and one we did in real time, we turned it black and white, and we had like film grain, so it looked like a black and white movie in real time. We did a Dutchman by Amari Baraka with Dule Hill and Jennifer Mudd. And
go ahead.
We decided to turn it into an homage to the original film version. So we put it in black and white. There was like film grain running through it. It looks really amazing. It was a lot of work.
So much. Okay, so this is all done, and this is done live streaming, live.
Yes.
And is there any sort of post-production, and then where people can go buy it at all, or is it a live event, one and done?
So there's no post-production. Everything's happening in real time. Our events are streamed live in real time for one performance, and then they're archived and available for rental for 4 days after that.
Just 4 days.
So they are these really amazing little time capsules.
Oh, it's like seeing live theater. It's like seeing live stand-up on Zoom, where you're like, no, this is it. This is, we don't know. I'm going to mention how Ben is blazing up when I go to Gallery View, and you're just going to be there for that, and that's going to be it. That's so cool. That is, that's awesome. So pay-per-view, is it payperview.com or? Play
dash per view. Yeah, it's a play. No pun intended. It's a play on pay-per-view. It's play-perview.com, but it also has a secondary meaning. So it's spelled Perview, but it's also referencing the word purview as to have a view of an idea or.
Oh my God, theater nerds! I love theater dudes.
So
that's awesome.
I really dig it, and it's nice to kind of have that duality, because the hope is that when all of this is back to normal, whatever that means, that we'll still be producing digital work, but hopefully being able to bring this into the physical realm as well.
Is it spelled like that? Play-per-view?
It is spelled like this.
Okay, just because I want to get it right in the notes. And, it's per view, and it's one word, and it's not P-U-R, it's P-E-R-V-I-E. That's awesome. I I am giggly about it. That's how great that is. Well played. Okay, so cool. When's the next one?
So
Anything on the books?
So by the time this comes out, I am not 100% sure what'll be officially announced. But we've got some like really cool stuff in the works.
So just go to that website and do you have an email list over there?
Yeah,
One
you
would
can set up
imagine.
an email list. In 6 months, we've got 6,000 people on our email list, which is kind of amazing.
That rules.
It's cool. It's really kind of become this like it's been a lot of like testing and all this other stuff, but now we're consistently on Saturdays. So for some people, we're just like the Saturday thing that they do now. They don't really care what the play is itself. It's just like, oh, I can see theater in my living room for $5 a shot.
And it all benefits different charities. Is that true?
Yeah.
Are you also paying the actors and the writers?
Yes,
or?
everyone that's involved gets an honorarium for their time. So
good.
Everyone is
because there is no work. So if this is work, they should get some money for it. So that's great.
Yes. We've put honorariums in the hands of over 100 artists over the last 6 months. So,
yes.
And we're progressively working to increase that amount. We've already doubled what the payout was from when we first started, and we're looking to double that again moving forward.
All right, this is the best, Jeremy Wein. But let us discuss the life and times, the work of a guy whose name I know, but it is such a basic name. How could I not know it? Kevin Smith. Kevin Smith? I get him mixed up with the guy who did the Fantastic Fox. Isn't that a guy named Smith? No,
I think so. What is your reference point to Kevin Smith? Have you ever seen any of his movies or any of his stuff?
Maybe. Who? What?
So, I mean, if people don't know, Kevin Smith is really kind of notorious for this movie called Clerks. There's a big mythology about it he sold all his comic books, and it cost $27,000, and he made it with his friends and in the convenience store that he was working at overnights, and he's like the sort of the triumph of a sort of a hipster, but created hope for, because that I remember when that came out, it was huge. It was sort of like, did you ever see El Mariachi Rodriguez? Yeah, it's a similar idea. It was the idea of like people taking a shoestring budget and just like not waiting for other people to open doors, and they're like, we're gonna go make this thing with people that we love to work with, and hopefully there are other people in the universe that dig what we're trying to do.
Right. I never have seen Clerks. How does it? Have you seen it? I mean, I don't know how it ages. Quite honestly, it may not, and that's not his fault, right?
Yeah, I mean, the last time I saw it was 2 years ago, and it was actually the first time I got to actually see it in a theater. I've only ever seen it on DVD or home video. They did this. So Kevin, throughout his career, has done these things called Vulgarthon. These are like these are essentially like Kevin Smith film festivals. So they feature his work, and sometimes they feature the work of like his friends or people that like his company is producing, et cetera, et cetera. And they hadn't done one for a very, very long time. So Kevin had a massive heart attack a couple of years ago.
How old is Kevin Smith?
He just turned 50.
What? 50?
He had a widowmaker two years ago.
What's
which
that?
Is like it's when one of your arteries to your heart. I'm pointing up here like this is where your heart is, up near my nipple.
Left.
It's actually, for people that don't know, your heart is actually in the middle of your chest.
Okay. All right.
He had one of the arteries was 99% clogged. So it was like that. It's called a widowmaker. It usually takes you out.
Right.
You have a heart attack with that much impact.
Wow.
And he survived, and so they hadn't done this Vulgarthon thing in a really long time. So his buddy Ernie O'Donnell, who's also in Clerks, reached out to him and was like, hey, for your birthday this year, we should do Vulgarthon, like, because he's survived this massive thing. So we went to Red Bank, and it was really amazing. It was like being with like 300 other people that just love Kevin's work and getting to watch, like, they took the original film lineup from the first one from like 98.
Okay.
And in one theater, it played in one order, and in the second theater, it played in the reverse order. And they did like Q&As after every one. And so I felt really fortunate because in our theater, the last movie we saw was Clerks. So we had like we were doing the 5 movies backwards, and the other theater was doing the 5 movies forwards.
And what are the 5 movies?
It was, I believe it was Clerks, it was Mallrats, I think.
I've heard of that too.
Dogma, and then
I saw Dogma. Okay.
This movie called Drawing Files, which is a smaller movie that he produced. One of his friends directed it. I think Vincent Peralta was the director of that movie.
Okay.
And then I can't remember off the top of my head what the 5th was, because I was also kind of through all of this going in and out of the theater, because like all of the people that Kevin has ever worked with were just like hanging around. So like, you know, Brian.
That's what you get for living in New York and being in a theater, is that you get to see and meet all these people. Wow.
Well, they did this in New Jersey. They did this in Red Bank, New Jersey, where Kevin's
Oh, that's
from.
what Red Bank is. I don't know what Red Bank is. That's what.
Yeah.
Oh, he grew up in New Jersey. Okay.
Yeah, he's a Jersey boy.
Are you from New Jersey?
No, I am not. I'm from South Florida. I'm probably the complete opposite of New Jersey. But that being said, you know, a lot of people that Kevin worked with on Clerks, they still live there. You know what I mean? Those were his friends and all the people that he like grew up with. So like, you know, the movies are playing and I'm kind of like popping in and out because it's like, oh, Brian O'Halloran, who played Dante, is hanging out, and Ernie Klein, who was this guy in Clerks, and this person from the, you know, they're all just kind of mulling around outside. And so it's just kind of like popping in and out to just like see what's going on.
Ernie Klein, who is Ernie Klein? Who did Ready Player One?
No. That's a different one.
That's a different guy named Ernie Klein? Okay. Because he was on the Dork Forest, that guy.
Oh, was he?
Yeah. So, wow. So, Cop Out. Okay, here, first of all, Jeremy, let me tell you that who I was mixing Kevin Smith up with, because I do no research, was Wes Anderson.
Yeah, 2 very different filmmakers and personalities. And
yeah, because they're different people. But I don't. But I can't tell. They're are they white guys of a certain age? Because it's all a blur to me. But then I have that face thing, which I think also is called self-absorption. But let's do. So I'm trying to. He did something called Tusk. Oh, Fanboys, was that him?
No, he's in. He makes a cameo in that movie.
Okay.
Have you ever seen Fanboys?
No.
It's a really funny little movie that had like a really weird history with the Weinstein Company over Final Cut and whatnot. But the premise of the movie is about these guys that grew up loving Star Wars, and it's like 2 weeks before Episode 1 is supposed to come out.
That's Ernie Klein, I think.
Ernie wrote that movie.
Yeah.
I definitely believe Ernie wrote that movie.
And okay, so tell me a story about Kevin Smith, and I'm going to look up Ernie Klein. So just because that's where I'm at.
Okay, yeah, you know, I've been really fortunate to get to meet Kevin several times over the years, and I'll tell you a very recent story. So in the middle of all this pandemic stuff, so in Kevin's movies, there's a fictional fast food restaurant called Moobies.
How do you spell that?
Moobys.
I knew it wasn't what I thought I heard. There we go.
So they decided, well, before the pandemic, they were planning on doing this this like pop-up restaurant. You know, they've been doing a couple of these in LA. It's the same people that did the Saved by the Bell one and the Breaking Bad one, et cetera, et cetera. And, you know, so they decided, even with everything going on, they were still going to go ahead with it and do all the social distance stuff, et cetera, et cetera. Concurrent to that, you know, I'm in a long distance relationship with someone in LA.
Congratulations and my condolences.
Very hard.
Yeah.
But so this is like about 3 months into the pandemic, and I was like, I have to go see her because like, I just, you know, it's hard to do a long distance relationship. It's even harder when suddenly you're not seeing that person every 6 to 8 weeks because you're going here for work, et cetera, et cetera. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go and we'll go to Big Bear and like, we'll have like a social distance vacation, blah, blah, blah. And the dates timed out to when they were doing this pop-up restaurant. So I was like, okay, so I'll like hang back in LA for like a couple days. So I sent a tweet out that was like, I never want my my Kevin Smith fandom questioned. I'm going to movies in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah.
And he retweeted me.
What?
And he was like, no, think about your health. But I guess, you know, if you're going to come all this way, I might as well come by and say hi. So the man, again, this is in the middle of a pandemic. This man takes time out of his day to come down. When we went to the pop-up, he came down, took pictures with me and my buddy, talked to us for like a good 10 minutes. And it's like, he doesn't have to do that to start with. Right. Let alone in the middle of a pandemic. And I think that's what's so smart about Kevin is that like he understands fandom. Like he understands that like because he was one of us.
He was a fan, right? He's one of those guys. He's a guy that comes from that sort of nerd place, and then he becomes very popular. So he knows that he better because he knows how long the memories are of. I mean, it's not why I'm available to Rangers of the Dork Forest, just because I would also like to talk about your dorkdom, but it is partially that because I know that we're all just a little bit obsessed in our own minds, and so who doesn't want to? Like, are you kidding? When I met Cage Baker, I lost my shit. And this is my favorite science fiction writer. Anyway, same with N.K. Jemisin, my current favorite living science fiction writer. So I was in an elevator with her, and I said, "Are you N.K. Jemisin?" And she goes, "Naomi, yes." And I said, "I'm a very large fan. I'm a huge fan." And she's like, "Great." And then we left that elevator. Anyway, so so you got to hang out with him and go to what was movies though? What was it?
So it was like so in the films, it's like this McDonald's, Burger King kind of place. You know, Dogma, I think, is like where it first pops up, and it's it plays this big part in the idea in the film, talking about like false idols and all of this other stuff because it's the golden. Their mascot is a golden calf.
Oh, okay.
So when you went, they had like a couple of things from that they've referenced in the films, like cow tipper, which is the Big Mac, and they had the recent Jay and Silent Bob's reboot. There's another restaurant introduced called Cock Smokers, which is a chicken place.
Okay.
So they had the Cock Smoker chicken sandwich.
Okay.
And then they had Hater Tots, which is another movies thing that gets referenced in those. So it's like a lot of like that geek food thing of like, oh, we're turning the things from the movie into like things you can actually have in real life.
Yeah. I think they do that at Universal for The Simpsons and stuff. It's excellent, excellent marketing and all that. Mike, I think I get him and Mike Judge mixed up too. Wow.
Guys of a certain age.
I guess it's guys of a certain age who have a very, I mean, they're usually super smart, but also super dumb kind of senses of humor, right? Where it's like this mix of you're like, oh, you're monumentally overeducated and you're also a 7.5-year-old child. And put those two together, it's awesome.
Well, or in the case of Mike Judge being a prophet and predicting idiocracy
Yeah,
10 years too early.
Yeah, get lost, go away, I'm baiting. Anyway, so yeah, it's brutal.
But I think, going back to the idea that he just gets it, I mean, think about the idea of Clerks when it came out. What other movie before that were characters sitting around talking about Jaws and Star Wars and like all this other stuff? It really feels like, I know this is going to sound like a weird thing, but it feels like the first filmic representation of like, quote, nerd culture in a way.
Yeah, it could have been. I mean, where it's just sort of a celebration of it, right? Where you're just like,
or just relatable on the sense of like, how many, one of the famous conversations in that movie is about, well, what about the contractors that worked on the second Death Star?
Oh,
like how often do you sit around, like you go out to bars with people or you have your D&D night and those kind of conversations.
That's the conversation that you have. You're just like, you think about it's like Star Trek Lower Decks, right? I mean, that show is made specifically for me and you and our kind, who are very nerd, like Star Trek centric, So that's awesome. Does he only do? I thought you said he did cartoons. Does he only do live action? No.
He does live action, but they turned the this goes into my other nerddom, which is animation. They very haphazardly. So there's two interesting things. So Clerks, they originally tried to adapt as a live action series. Several years later, and the big thing about that is that what's his name? I believe in the pilot, Jim Brewer plays one of the characters, plays Randall.
Okay.
They didn't bring anyone from the film into this TV version, and it's floating around. It's on like the 10th anniversary DVD, etc.
Okay.
And so it didn't work. And then 5 years later, ABC again tries to turn it into a cartoon, which has a very infamous thing because the movie is very much an R movie. ABC is trying to create this like answer to The Simpsons. So, in Clerks, Jay and Silent Bob are weed dealers. In the cartoon, they're fireworks dealers. And then like, there were only 6 episodes. They aired the 6th episode in production order second, which was a flashback episode to stuff that people had not seen at that point, which made it make even less sense.
Right.
Because they do the cliche, they both get locked in the freezer and
Sure.
They're flashing back to everything. But because it aired second instead of like 5th or 6th, they're referencing all of this stuff that no one has seen. So the show gets canceled after 2 episodes.
Okay.
Because people don't know what to think of it. They advertise this show during the Super Bowl.
Weird.
Yeah.
So they're pushing it, but they don't put it out right.
But they also don't know what exactly they're like. They don't know what they want it to be. And like, it was crazy. Like Alec Baldwin is like the mayor of the town, and
what?
It's crazy. It's a really crazy. It's 6 episodes, and it's really funny because it's gotten a good amount of play. It was in because again, I have to imagine it's only 6 episodes. The licensing for reruns is probably not a lot. So
right.
It's run on Comedy Central and reruns. It's run on Adult Swim and reruns. It's been around and around.
Right.
But it's so that's what's funny to me when you look at like that was such an interesting period because it felt like when everyone was trying to chase after family, like The Simpsons and stuff, like,
yeah,
like what is our Simpsons? Because at that point, like past the Flintstones, like no one understood after The Simpsons, like how to get adult animated
more of that
on prime time.
Right. And then the Venture Brothers was created and it's outstanding.
And it's also not happening anymore because
right, but they essentially lifted that model. as far as I can tell, and moved it to Harley Quinn on DC. So I don't know if you've seen that.
Oh, I have. It's amazing. The fact that it hasn't been picked up for a third season yet really
is weird. It's
boggles
very
my
odd.
mind.
And it's, I have to admit, super jealous that they got all male comics to do the voices. Did not get any women comics to do any of the women voices.
Well, I will. Well,
Make a note.
Wanda Sykes is on that show.
Right. She's a comic, but she's also a giant star. Like, I'm talking about Ron Funches and James Adomian, who are famous, and really good at what they do, and hilarious and wonderful, but not Wanda Sykes level.
Well, I mean, I already said this to you, and I can't really talk about it that much, but I am developing something that, like, you definitely are on our short list of, like...
Thank you very much. Yeah, I tweeted out, you guys, that I would like to do some voiceover work. Your animation, your audiobook, whatever, talk to me. That's right, Jackie at JackieCation.com. By the way, I am talking with Jeremy Wein, and I constantly want to go Wein, but it's Wein, and it's play per view is the thing that you're working with to put plays online, and it's for charity, and it pays actors and people involved, and at this my show for people to follow you on the Twitter. So yeah. It's interesting about Kevin Smith and Mike Judge and Wes Anderson. To lump them all together is to do them all a disservice, probably, because they don't need that. It'd be like saying that I'm Rosie O'Donnell, but it does both of us a disservice. So, but the crazy thing is like sometimes I know that I watch stuff like Clerks and I fear, this is what I fear, and has Kevin Smith addressed this? Is he part of the people that fixes this, where sometimes women don't feel comfortable, in the nerd culture? You know how sometimes boys are mean sometimes, and they're like, oh, girls, we're at our He-Man honeycomb club.
I think he's someone that's definitely evolved a lot as a creator and a filmmaker. Going back to the Vulgarthon thing, it was rewatching some of his films that I hadn't watched in a while, and there are some stuff that you kind of go, oh, that's and to his credit, during the Q&A, he
that's awesome.
He acknowledged all of it.
Literally that's what you want, right?
He acknowledged all of it, and I think a thing that really speaks to him as a person, he's someone that had his career is because of the Weinstein brothers.
Harvey Weinstein, that guy?
The
creepy. Okay.
Miramax released. Well, Miramax is the one that picked up Clerks out of Cannes, and is the reason that Kevin has a career. And to Kevin's credit, when all that stuff with Harvey started going down, he felt ashamed and embarrassed that he had any connection to him, and he made a commitment that his royalties on the films that were under the Weinstein umbrella, that he was going to be donating to an organization that helps promote women in film. Okay, that's awesome. It's this organization that, they do workshops with, female filmmakers and all this other stuff. And I think... That's real amends. That's like financial reparations kind of amends. That's the kind of, I've recently, I'm going to weed off here. We'll give you a couple extra minutes, Jeremy. But the thing is I was talking to a friend of mine, and we were talking about how this country has got a problem where it cannot be honest with itself and its own history. And if we could somehow, literally... You want to take the 12 steps from OA, from AA, from NA, from DA, from all of these anonymous groups, and go, the United States is unmanageable. The United States needs to do an inventory of things that we've done wrong, and we want to make a list and somehow try to fix that. We're doing it as individuals, right? And it sounds like Kevin Smith, that sort of acknowledgement, that sort of grown-up adult. I just did an episode a couple of episodes ago about Jay-Z, and the comic I was talking to was telling me how much of a relief it was that Jay-Z is essentially
I mean, the guy's 45, 50 years old, so he's growing up, you know? He's going to live to be 100 years old, so he has 40 years to figure out how not to cheat on his wife and not be a dick. And that's incredibly hopeful to me that Kevin Smith has that sort of sanity and that sort of sense of, you know, seeing, because we were all assholes in the 90s, right? I mean, there were things that I said and done, thank you, baby Jesus, that they weren't. And 10 years from now, things that I say now are probably going to be like, hey, jackass, what'd you say that for? And you're like, well, it was funny at the time. So, yeah. That's cool.
It's weird. It's weird to have to think about, to apply the rule of tattoos to like what your comedy and what you make jokes of. You know, if for people listening that don't know, the idea is like, if you're gonna get a tattoo, make sure you're as happy with it at 28 as you are when you're wrinkly at 66. You know, who
did the joke? God, I'm spacing her name. It might be Sarah Benicasa. Anyway, she has a tramp stamp on her back, and she's comic. And she did this joke about how she got that tramp stamp, and before it was called a tramp stamp, and she did it because she loved Jesus. And so it's a butterfly right above her butt, and she said the only way to fix it is to make it ironic and to put quote marks around it. Which is that's awesome. It's such a great bit. I can't. Sarah Benicasa, am I right?
I
don't know,
but I'm not sure.
Fair enough. Welcome to the Dork Forest, where I tend to weed off.
The internet will correct us if we're wrong.
They will. Oh, by the way, Ernie Klein did write Fanboys and Ready Player One.
Yes,
and he has been on the Dork Forest.
I mixed up Ernie Klein, and it's actually, the gentleman's name is Ernie O'Donnell.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's who was in the movies. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. I like rule of tattoos, though.
Yeah.
Do you have any tattoos?
I don't, but I remember the one and only tattoo I ever actually really wanted, which this opens up like a whole other can of worms into my life. I remember my mom, she had like a rose tattoo on her ankle, and she would go in every couple of years to get it like touched up, because she also used tanning beds a lot, so it would screw up the tattoo, I guess, I don't know, it was like 8. And I remember going in to this tattoo parlor with her and flipping through the book, the artist book or whatever, and there was this giant Bart Simpson on a skateboard. And I was like 8, and I was the only tattoo I've ever, and which would not have happened at that age because highly illegal.
Even in Florida, even in southern Florida, you guys.
My mom was a bad influence. She's the reason I got my ear pierced when I was like 16, which was like a whole other horrific thing of like.
Ooh,
she
did
took
it
me
get
to
infected?
a mall.
Yeah.
No, but the funny thing is, I took it out after not even a day, and somehow the hole stayed open. I still have my piercing, but I never wear a piercing except for sometimes I'll work someplace long enough, and then one day I'll just randomly walk in with this and people just get massively confused. Or something I've done before, and this speaks to how much of a maniac I am. I'll take a paper clip ahead of time and unfold it, and I'll sanitize it and whatnot, and I'll refold it. And I'll freak out my coworkers, and I'll just take the planted paperclip and undo it and just put it right through my ear, and they just go, "Oh my God, what are you doing?" And it's like, "Oh,
tetanus shot.
And it's like, I was like, well, I have a hole in my ear. I might as well use it for comedy.
Oh, that's so funny. That is so hilarious.
People go, your ear pierced? It's like, no. Just don't pay attention.
I, in the 90s, for a short-lived time, wanted to get Nightwolf from the Mortal Kombat Ultimate video game on my shin. It isn't okay. I look back at it and I cringe, and thank God I never did. I'd be an entirely different person, though I assume that I would own a Harley Davidson.
I mean, again, it ties back to my other thing of, like, I love animation, and for me, like, when I was, like, when I was like 8 years old, I loved The Simpsons. And the only reason, like, I still remember the first time I ever saw The Simpsons. My grandmother had a VHS copy of 2 episodes. Remember when, like, they used to release VHSs with, like, only 2 episodes?
And it was a nickel. It was like $6. And you thought you were getting a deal, and you kind of weren't.
Yeah. And I remember, it's so funny, I haven't thought about this in so long, but I can see the box was, like, green for some reason, and I can't remember what the second episode was, but I remember distinctly one of the episodes was the one where Marge takes bowling lessons, and I think the bowling instructor is Albert Brooks, and it was like this is like a second, third season episode, and it's like this whole thing of like, oh, she's going to leave Homer for this magnificent bowling instructor, and there's this thing where they share mozzarella stick, and this is when I was like, I say like 6?
Yeah.
This again says a lot about my upbringing. I was watching...
Sure.
I was watching a lot of the stuff that, like, people my age in the 90s were watching in animation, like Johnny Bravo and Rugrats and Hey Arnold, but at the same time, I remember staying up, being like 7 or 8, and staying up till 11:30 at night to watch Space Ghost.
Oh,
Not
my God.
really understanding what Space Ghost... Like, it's so funny. I've been developing this thing and going back... I've been going back to a lot of stuff in developing this thing to, like, really sink into reference points. And it's so wild now at 29 to watch these episodes of Space Ghost Coast to Coast versus when I was like 8 and just was like, ooh, funny voices and colors.
Nope. What about Beavis and Butthead?
Oh yeah, I watched that. I watched Daria. I watched Free South. I watched Celebrity Deathmatch. I watched Clone High.
You had no choice but to become a theater dork. That's it. You were like, and that's all old soul stuff, you know? I mean, that is like, even if you look at The Simpsons, you're like, it's so weird. I read a study once that said that it was the most popular show in the Latino community, The Simpsons, and they interviewed like thousands of people in the Latino community, or 12, who knows, this article, right? And they said that they watched it because it was a complete unit. It was a heterosexual father, mother, kids in a house kind of thing, and they thought that made it more wholesome. But if you watch The Simpsons, Homer Simpson is a fucking monster. He is the worst dad in the world. And
strangled his kid. They phase that out after a while, but if you go watch those early episodes, he like 2-hand strangles Bart.
He is not only an idiot, he is also financially irresponsible, just like violent, stupid, mean, drunken, like all of the, like he's literally the worst fucking guy in the world. But you're like, but he's all right, which is, I am the last generation of women who will be saying that, by the way. He's a nice enough guy.
Fun fact about The Simpsons, it is, to my knowledge, one of only 2 unscripted shows that premiered the year I was, well, technically it premiered in '89 with the Christmas episode, but it's officially premiered the year I was born, which is 1990. The other show that premiered that year that is still on the air is Monday Night Raw.
Oh, wrestling.
Yeah.
Oh, the wrestling thing.
It says a lot about the 90s that, like, the only 2 shows that
made it
in 90 and escaped the 90s are wrestling and The Simpsons.
Yeah. It's that 3rd season though was pretty amazing. If I remember, like I watched the first, I think probably 10 or 11 seasons of The Simpsons. And then you know how you just stop watching TV once you hit a certain age for some reason. Are you still watching The Simpsons?
I'm not, but you know what's funny is that, like, I've been real tempted, and I used to watch it religiously, Jackie. Every Sunday, religiously. And the funny
planned
thing,
around it, yeah.
But because of that, I watched King of the Hill every single week. I watched Family Guy. I watched all of the random 1-2 season things that you know what, I was rewatching the other night because for whatever reason I found it on demand. The PJs, the Eddie Murphy stop motion show that was on for 3 years.
Nope, I don't remember that at all. How was it?
It's really weird to watch that show stoned and in HD.
Yeah.
Because it's claymation, so when it aired, it premiered in '99 and it ran for a couple years after. It was in standard definition.
Right.
It wasn't high def. So now I'm watching high def, which it creates almost this uncanny valley thing because you can really see how clay it all
Right.
is.
Oh yeah.
It's really weird and disorienting. And I was on an edible the other night, and I turned this on, and I was like, oh man, this is weird.
Oh,
and
man.
It is terribly held up. The premise to begin with is a pretty.
What is the
questionable
premise?
So the premise is it takes place in a housing project, and Eddie Murphy plays Super, who is the super of the building.
Okay.
And there's a character named Haiti Lady, because she's from Haiti.
Oh, okay.
There's another character that just smokes so much his face is just always obscured by a cloud of smoke. There's the lady at HUD is a regular character.
Okay.
And it was just like I watched like 2 or 3 episodes the other night, and I was just like, oh man, this
And
is bad.
the writing doesn't hold up? Is it kind of like is it easy stuff?
I don't know, but it's
Unfortunately.
also it's clearly the reason the show got on the air is because somehow Eddie Murphy. Well, and also this was one of Larry Wilmore was a co-creator of this show too.
Oh, okay.
This is one of his earlier credits.
Okay.
And then weirdly, Ron Howard and Brian Glazer, I can't ever remember.
Oh,
But
yeah,
they're
yeah.
a company that had a deal at Fox and I think still does. But that's all to say that I've watched it makes a lot of sense of who I am now on the basis of what I was watching then.
Yeah.
I loved Clone High.
What's
love
that?
Clone High.
What is that?
It's on MTV. Executive produced by Bill Lawrence. The first real credits that Phil Lord and Chris Miller had, they co-created this show. Who have now done Into the Spider-Verse and 21 Jump Street and everything you've ever loved in the last 5 to 7 years. The Lego Movie, Last Man on Earth. Yeah. So the premise of the show is, and it's so great because the theme song spells it all out too. But essentially in the 80s, the government created this cloning program. So they cloned all these famous people, and now they all go to high school together. So it's like Cleopatra and Abe Lincoln's. It's like the clone of Cleopatra and the clone of Gandhi and the clone of Abe Lincoln and the clone of JFK all going to high school together.
Okay.
And the evil scientist is the principal, and he has a butler robot named Mr. Butlertron. It ran for a season. It's been that thing that people have it's the only thing I've ever wanted to see brought back or rebooted because it was so ahead of its time and so insane and goofy.
That's cool.
Marilyn Manson is a guest voice at one point. It's so crazy and insane. And Zach Braff and Donald Faison and Will Forte and all these amazing people worked on it. And they just actually announced that they're rebooting that show. MTV or Comedy Central is really doubling down on animation.
Okay.
They're bringing that back. It's not a reboot of Daria, but it's taking one of the characters from Daria and centering her in her own show.
How Ender's shadow of them. Okay.
Something like that. Yeah, it's Jodie, who was the only black female character on that show. And so this iteration, Tracy Ellis Ross is going to be voicing the character. But
I don't know who that is. Who is that?
Well, Diana Ross's daughter.
Okay, thank you.
Also on Blackish, if you've ever
Okay,
watched.
on Blackish. Okay.
But essentially, it's funny to watch. You've seen a lot of live action stuff being cycled, and now it's interesting to see the anime. They're bringing Beavis and Butthead back again. I've heard they're talking about bringing Ugly Americans back on Quibi, which is a great cult show that was on Comedy Central for 3 years with Matt Oberg and I can't remember her name. It'll come to me at the Natasha Leggero. It's an early
okay.
Natasha Leggero credit. Pete Holmes did voices, and it's this really great show done in like the EC Comics kind of style.
Okay.
It takes place in a New York where zombies and werewolves and ghosts and stuff are all real, with like actual people walking around, and it's centered on the main character leads this support group for creatures. So there's like a fish man, but the upper part is the fish and the lower part is the man. So that's like really great, and I've been rewatching that as a reference to the thing I've been working on. But yeah, it's
that's
really,
a deep dive, man. That is some dive into some anime long boxes.
it is. I wasn't kidding when I said that is like my second dorkdom. I mean, you won't see, this is an audio podcast unless you're watching a video, but Jackie will confirm. I have a giant Adult Swim flag hanging over my bed right now.
Right, which is, and people can watch it on YouTube. I've been posting them since quarantine on the YouTube. So the only thing I know from Adult Swim was the Venture Brothers. That's the only thing I watched.
Wow, I have so like my love of Adult Swim, like as I was saying, it predates Adult Swim existing. You know, I remember watching Space Ghost Coast to Coast in real time when I was little, and I still remember at the very end, this isn't in some of the reruns or the streaming you can find, they put up at the end of every episode, you could fax fan letters to Ghost Planet Industries, which was the production company before it became William Street. So I remember distinctly at the end, you would hear like the dial-up, and it would say fax us Ghost Planet. Like you could and to me it's like what an early example of like fan engagement before social media or any of that kind of stuff. It was like literally like, here's how you can fax stuff to the production office, because why not?
What was Ghost Coast to Coast about?
Space Ghost?
Space Ghost. Yeah.
Was the idea. So they essentially Ted Turner had just acquired Hanna-Barbera. And essentially the story is they were like trying to figure out like what to do with this stuff. And someone took the idea of like, oh, what if we repurpose Space Ghost from like the you know, him being the superhero? What if he's a talk show host and, you know, the one villain is his band leader and the other villain is the video operator, and it starts and at a certain point Harvey Birdman gets pulled into it, and all of these other kind of like Hanna-Barbera superhero kind of
so
characters.
it's just clip art essentially from a decade of cartoons, repurposed and then turned into a talk show.
So, to a degree, they would essentially, so the brilliant thing is all of the guests were live, so they would be on this little screen that would come down. And so the idea would be they did these interviews in real life. So they had someone dress up as in a Space Ghost costume and interview. And it's crazy if you go back and look at the guests. They had like REM and they had like Emo Phillips. Like they just like had everyone you would like ever like associate with the 90s on that show.
Yeah.
Like the two guys from Metallica, like it's crazy to go back and watch who said yes to the insanity, especially in the very early stages of this. So the idea would be they would do this interview and then they would retro script based on the answers that were given to like very normal questions.
Right.
And it would become like it's you know, Eric Andre says that Space Ghost is his biggest influence for the Eric Andre show.
Okay.
In the sense that this chaotic it's this chaotic talk show concept, but my love of Adult Swim is where that started, and I still remember watching, you know, the first night that like it premiered proper,
because it was just a block of time, right?
It was a block of time. So Adult Swim actually officially premiered in December 30th of 1999. Because of budgetary things, they had to air these pilots before the end of the fiscal year in order for the budget to not get affected. But it doesn't premiere proper until I believe September 10th, 2000. which is then when, so they had greenlit several other shows to live in this block, and then they also picked up home movies. They had picked up reruns of Baby Blues from Warner Brothers.
What's Home Movies?
Home Movies is the Lauren Picard show that predates Bob's Burgers.
Okay. And what's the blue one?
Baby Blues was a very short-lived cartoon adaptation of the comic strip of the same name.
Okay. You should know that I stopped watching television from like 1995 to 2010.
This is great. This is what this is all about, right? It's not about stuff, but it was with Drew Carey, and I believe Diedrich Bader was also a voice. This came out of, the Drew Carey show being on the WB,
ABC,
Synergy. But so that was, and it's crazy to think about, like, when Adult Swim premiered, I was like 9 years old, and like I'm 29 now, and it's really insane to look at, like I don't think people, like, you can trace back the beginning of Adult Swim to stuff like Liquid Television and all of that kind of like MTV early 90s animation stuff, and you're seeing it like impacting stuff now. I think people now are really starting to understand the whole punk, DIY, CBG, the idea of Adult Swim into other animation. Like, thinking about, like, have you had a chance to watch John Hodgman's new cartoon that he did with David Reese? It's called Dicktown. It was airing on FXX. It's on Hulu. But it's essentially, it's John and David as like Hardy Boy characters, and they live in this nondescript town called Richardville, but everyone calls it Dicktown.
Sure.
And you watch it and you can clearly see the influence of Archer.
Yeah.
And Archer doesn't happen unless C-Lab 2021 happens through Adult Swim.
When Aisha Tyler was on the Dork Forest, I think in 2007 or 8, maybe 9, I asked her what she was doing. And she was like, Archer? And I was like, what is that? Anyway, I have seen Archer. Archer is very dark and funny, and but I have not seen Dicktown. There's this irreverence in animation that started from that time, that Adult Swim, where it's just like, we can make dick jokes, and we can...
Or more so that there is an audience for adult animation, in the sense of, like, past the peg of The Simpsons, South Park, Family Guy. Like,
it tends to manifest itself at its most basic level as dick jokes. But there's also anime and manga, right, for every age and which I think came in and kind of influenced it, don't you think? Yeah. Because manga can be for babies, and it could also be porn, and it could also be for for seniors, and it could be dramatic, and it could be not, comedic, or it could be all the things.
Well, that's another kind of brilliant thing that's been happening through Adult Swim right now, is that, they revived something called Toonami, which was a very popular anime block of programming that Cartoon Network ran through the late 90s into the early aughts. That's what we're calling it, right? I still don't know.
Sure. What the heck?
Period. And it went away for a very long time. And to his credit, Jason DeMarco, who has always been the one at Adult Swim that's pushed animation, Saturday nights have infamously been the anime night on Adult Swim. He was like, we should bring back Toonami, and it should be part of our programming, which has been a huge hit, especially now with Crunchyroll, and like how much anime and manga has really impacted the U.S. market. It's such a brilliant thing, to the effect that now they are commissioning. I think they're one of the only American broadcast networks that is commissioning anime in the way that they are. Like, they're working on a Blade Runner anime sequel series, which is like a huge deal. They were the only.
I wonder if they're using the comic book, because I'm reading the comic book, which is a follow-up to Blade Runner, and of course there was a sequel Blade Runner movie.
Right.
And
it's called Blade Runner Black Lotus.
Okay.
think it does pull some inspiration from the book.
Yeah.
But more so, like, it's just interesting to watch all of that influence into other things. Like, it's not animation, but like, tell me that every third commercial you see these days isn't inspired by Tim and Eric and their video work in like 2005, 2006.
Right, which I wasn't watching Tim and Eric, and I know Maria Bamford has been on Tim and Eric, and I'm supposed to care because she's my friend. But what is Tim and Eric? Someone should explain this to me?
Tim and Eric is the shorthand of Tim Heidecker and Eric Warheim. They made weird short films, and Bob Odenkirk caught on to them and was like, "Oh, this is like the closest thing to what me and David were doing. Like, I'm so on board with this." So the first thing they created was a thing called Tom Goes to the Mayor, which was a very weird show in the sense of the design style. All the characters were fed through dot matrix printers. So they all have this weird blue dot kind of printout look to them.
Right.
It's very cheap and whatnot. But then they created this show called Tim and Eric Awesome Show, Great Job, which is a live action sketch show, which just everyone's been on. And that's the first time I ever saw Maria was on that show.
Okay.
And you go back and it's like Ted Danson was on that show, Zach Galifianakis was on that show. It just goes on and on and on. But the thing that set that show apart was the editing aesthetic. It was very much UHF, public access, hiring non-actors as actors, hiring from central casting. So you always got these very weird, interesting people. And like, I just watched a thing today that Paul Rudd did for the city of New York, encouraging people to wear masks. It's a Tim and Eric sketch. The aesthetic, the editing, the pacing, everything. And it was super weird to watch a thing that is essentially an official New York City public service announcement done in that style.
Okay. Yeah, that is right. It's the influence of that stuff. I mean, I look at all the influences of, it's all so blurry, like there's all this sort of retroactive. I love, people are stating their love of just sort of pixeled, video games from when I was, in the late 70s and early 80s, where you're like, no, that's the cool thing. We're going to make this video game look like the video games from then. And you're like, yeah, but you could make it look like it's real. And they're like, no, I need it to look 2D. So
for me, it's the idea of like, well, who are the people that have disposable income? It's the people that were kids in the 80s and the 90s. They're the ones that now have
they have the cash. Yeah.
They're the ones that they're the majority of the market share. So it's like, so yeah. Why not design the thing that makes someone remember being 11 years old and waking up on Saturday morning and turning on the Super Nintendo or whatever?
Right, but what are you going to remember? Are you going to remember the thing that I remember? It's like there's no, like, I grew up in hip hop, right? So it's KRS-One and Biggie and all those guys. And so now there's just more hip hop, but they're still referencing that hip hop, and there's no new musical style. I mean, someone just asked if they could talk about English bells, but which is very Middle Ages.
Like the ding dong.
Yeah, the old.
Yeah, like the you see them outside during the holidays.
Yeah, I think so. So maybe that'll too cope. But I don't know what I want. I know that there's so much great new stand-up and there's new writing that's happening, right? But it doesn't feel like the tech is going so fast that I think like the new tech nerds are like, we could recreate things from the past so that I can get, that old white dude to give me a giant bag of money to make my new writing, right? The writing is new.
Right. And I mean, I'll bring up something like, when this goes out in a couple of weeks, it won't be new news, but this broke. So they just announced that they are doing a animated reboot of Good Times, developed by Carl Jones, who helped bring the Boondocks to TV and like
Yeah.
a bunch of other amazing stuff. They just announced that like an hour ago that they're doing an animated reboot of Good Times with Carl, Seth MacFarlane, and Norman Lear is going to be involved in a producing capacity, which God bless him because the man's almost 100 years old now.
Right. It's like Carl Reiner. But the what about? The weirdest thing that I just saw was that there was some new drama that was coming out, and it was about two things. One, there was a new animated TV show that they just canceled that was a ripoff of Hair Love, which won the short that won the Oscar.
The Nick Jr. thing that they claim they had in development before, but they can't produce anything predating when Matthew Cherry's Kickstarter ended.
And literally the entire cast and creative crew there are no people of color.
They were like for some black creative, as a white woman in like a white producing
team and a white male team and a white woman team, and you're just like, yeah, just because the PAs are black people, that doesn't count. I'm so sorry. Yeah, you need some creative, and then there was a black-led ensemble cast and no women and no black people in the writers' room.
Right.
And so you're like,
that was the Netflix series that they just my
you're
buddy,
following the news. Good work.
My buddy, I want to produce and I want to be in this realm of stuff. So, you got to keep tabs. But the thing is, my friend, Ming Pfeiffer, who's a brilliant playwright, wrote this amazing play called Usual Girls, which people should read. It's available.
Usual Girls.
He was one of the writers on that show. And when they posted the trailer the other day, she was like, this is a mess. And this is not representative of what was actually going on behind the scenes. And it's very disingenuous that Netflix is, positioning the show as like black voice, black centered, blah blah blah, when behind the scenes all this stuff was going on.
Right. It's just, the thing is it's an awareness of going forth in the industry and in every industry. How about that? Plumbing. But just try to be more inclusive but especially with storytelling. If you want to tell a story, my husband's a game designer, and he was just talking to a guy about how when if he has to write a woman character in level design and there's a storyline to it, how does he write a woman character? Everybody gets to write about other people and try to get that perspective, but you have to make sure that you have some sort of input and that you have some sort of empathy, right? And it's another job, right? We all have 3,700 jobs now. And if you want to, you're like, no, we should tell these stories about these people. You have to also employ those people.
And to me, it's like, to bring this full circle back around.
Right, because we are at an hour, my friend.
I think, the thing that's always inspired me a lot about Kevin Smith is like, he did this. He knew he had a story. He felt that the story would relate to other people, but at its basic level, it's like, even if no one digs it, I did this thing with my friends, and I'm proud of it, and et cetera, et cetera. And that's always instilled this this thing to me of like, the way I say it is, I don't wait for someone to open a door for me. I pick up a chainsaw and rip one into the wall.
Right. Right. You just make the thing, do the thing.
It's the thing, don't let people go, that's a stupid idea, or no one's going to watch that, or no one's going to listen to your music, it's like, make it and put it into the universe. If anything, there's a double-edged sword to the internet of like, it brings a lot of bad people together, but it also...
We did not create the internet so that Nazis could meet each other. I swear to God. But that's what's happening.
That's what's happening. But what I'm saying is, the flip of it is that, it's so easy. As much as I start to feel like old man on my lawn, like, look how creative people are being on TikTok. Like, it's like the internet has made it so easy. The
technology's there. Use it.
it's made it so easy to get your stuff in front of people and connect to other people. Because, like, who cares if some studio executive isn't into it? If you've got 20,000 people on your Patreon and, like, they're into your stuff and, like, you're sustaining yourself, like, do it, you know?
You know, all you need, this is a band model from the 70s. If you can get 1,000 people to give you $100 a year, that's $100,000. You get 4 people in your band, that's $25,000 a year for 4 people. And
Well, there's
that's
legal expenses and travel and
well,
No.
unless and what that is that's merch sales. That's why bands sold merch. And so if you can get 1,000 people to give you $100 a year on the internet, that's $100,000, you know?
Well, that goes back to the Fugazi. The whole thing with that band was that they were infamous that their shows were $5 for years and years and years and years and years and years, because they were like, that's how they built their base. That's how they heard that whoever could come see them. They didn't believe in merch. Some of the shows there weren't even physical tickets for. And the favorite thing, I was just reading a bunch of history about the band. One of my favorite things about that is, you know, they did these $5 shows, and they would keep a stack of $5 bills in their tour van, so that when they had to pick people out for moshing and being violent, they would just hand them a $5 bill and throw them out of the building.
Oh, perfect. That is awesome. And then, so this is great. This is a great message to go out on, which is that you got to make and do your thing. The other thing that people beat themselves up about, they're like, well, I don't want to start a podcast. There's hundreds of thousands of podcasts. I'm like, yeah, you're not going to make a shitty podcast. Don't worry about it. Make the thing that you love, and it'll be as good or as bad as it's going to be. But if you like it, it genuinely doesn't matter. Just make the thing you want to make and see if anyone gives a shit. That's why I moved to Los Angeles, to see if anyone cared. And so far, everyone's been very polite. Okay.
I mean, everything going on, what do you have to lose by throwing your hat in the creative ring? and
You've
seeing,
never had anything to lose.
you know?
You're just going to sit around anyway, so you might as well do the thing you like and put it out there. Jeremy, Wein, you are great. This has been fascinating and encouraging and wonderful. And everyone, This My Show, ThisMyShow, This My Show, at This My Show is his Twitter, playperview.com, right?
Play-review.com, yes.
There we go. And I'll put them both in the notes. And we have been talking about animation and Kevin Smith and all the good things. And thank you so much for being on the show finally, man.
It was a dream come true. It was a pleasure.
Awesome. And Rangers, you know the rules out there. Take care of each other.
My hat, my hat, my hat. They're dancing around my hat. My hat, my hat, my hat. Well, what do you think of that? If it looks like a Mexican hat dance and it sounds like a Mexican hat dance, it's most likely a Mexican hat dance. So take off your hat and let's dance.
Yay! Oh my God. Why don't we just call that as the end?